Watch this.
Powering up the grid. It's not easy with what's considered a very hot resource right now. So how does hydropower work when there's not a lot of water? And for people living in the West, open spaces are a major commodity too. How a city rallied to pay for the future of its trails. Well, Idaho water users are taking a hit, and summer technically hasn't even started yet. We still have about 10 days before the mark of the new season. Now, if you farm for a living, that's probably not great news because a lot of surface water users are already being told that there's less water available than they were hoping to get. Now, we're going to get to those impacts in just a few minutes, but first, it is worth remembering that water in Idaho doesn't just grow crops, it also generates electricity every single year. Mountain snowpack acts like a natural savings account. Snow falls in the winter, melts in the spring, it fills reservoirs, which spins the turbines and helps keep the lights on. It's a pretty good system, unless, of course, there isn't enough snow to make the deposit. We're going to talk about that specific topic, in just a second. Back to the drought that we're living through. Irrigation users in the state are concerned. They say the amount of water available is not cutting it. The Surface Water Coalition, a group made up of farmers, ranchers, irrigators across southern Idaho, say there simply isn't enough water available to get through the growing season without some very difficult decisions. And when we say difficult decisions, it means deciding which fields get water and which ones don't. Some producers are already being forced to choose what crops to save, what crops to sacrifice. Think about that for a second. Farmers spend months planning a growing season, buying seed, fertilizer, and equipment, and now some are being told there may not be enough water to finish what they started. Well, according to NOAA, more than 940,000 Idahoans are living in this drought. And those areas most impacted, parts of Owyhee and Twin Falls County. The coalition says this lack of water is an issue most members are dealing with. Members that work on 550,000 acres of the state's farmland. And for Idaho, every field that doesn't get water is less food, feed, and of course, less economic activity moving through rural Idaho communities. A situation that ripples through the entire state. Now, the group will continue to provide updates as we continue through the summer. All right, this week we've been looking into seclusion in Idaho schools. A CUNA mom is demanding accountability and change after her young son with special needs was placed in seclusion several times, sometimes for hours. Kayla Flick believes some of those were for discipline, which is illegal under state law. Tonight, we explore potential alternatives to seclusion. Experts say the tools to eliminate it already exist. The question is whether or not schools are using them. Advocates point to de-escalation programs and quiet sensory rooms to help decompress students before they escalate. Currently, several local school districts use sensory spaces.
I have worked with colleagues who have worked in some of the most challenging settings that have eliminated seclusion and reduced restraint. Settings like acute psychiatric settings, forensic prison settings, settings where people would have said that's not possible, yet it has been possible.
The state is also stepping up to help teachers with the #1 issue. The superintendent of public instruction hears about classroom behavior management. Investigative reporter Morgan Romero has part 3 of the series Secluded in School tonight on the news at 10. To watch our previous stories, be sure to head to our website, ktvb.com. A hike through the foothills.
It was probably one of the most
It's more than just a hike.
important things that helped to define our city during that time.
We look back at a levy that paid for the future of the trails. And do you remember the Foothills levy 25 years ago? Let us know in the comments. Text us at 208-321-5614, and we'll talk about it at the end of the show. All right, when you think about Boise, you might think of the canopy of trees, a very quickly growing skyline, maybe the Boise River rushing through town. But towering over all of that are the foothills. There are some houses up there, but they are largely untouched, still looking like they did 25 years ago when the people of Boise voted to approve a levy to protect them. Justin Corer hiked into the foothills today to talk to one of the main people responsible for that levy passing, who just now happens to be the mayor.
This was the scene 25 years ago on May 22nd, 2001, as 59% of Boise voters approved passage of the first Foothills levy.
When you look at those hills, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's our home. It symbolizes so much of why we live here.
That was Lauren McLean 25 years ago, one of the leaders of the campaign to pass the levy. Here she is today. Now, of course, the mayor of Boise.
We were all really worried. I mean, think back, we were asking in 2001 for Boiseans to tax themselves for open space and trails. It was such a new idea for Boise. A parks bond about a decade before had failed, and so nothing had been tried again. And it was truly, I mean, many people in this community said it couldn't be done.
But it got done, securing $10 million to purchase and preserve some of the foothills and open space around the city.
Development was booming in the foothills, and folks were concerned that they were going to lose access to trails they loved and open spaces in their backyard that they were used to enjoying and kind of defined their existence and identity as Boiseans.
Boise Parks and Rec Director Sarah Arkle says that $10 million had a huge impact, buying all the land in green on this map. Some estimates have its value today at more than $40 million. Voters approved a second levy in 2015 with 74% support, buying all the land in orange and helping to make the trails and improvements in purple. But the people of Boise were not done, approving a third clean water and open space levy just last year with more than 80% support.
So now Boiseans in the last 25 years have said yes 3 times, and more Boiseans say yes every time. And we don't take it for granted. I want to be clear about that. You know, we worked hard to demonstrate that we're using the dollars accountably and in really efficient ways.
So far, levy funds have been used to protect more than 12,500 acres in the Boise foothills, as well as to preserve park property, protect wildlife habitat, provide recreational opportunities, improve access to open space, park sites and pathways, and enhance clean water.
I think people feel responsible for these places and really take them to heart. You bring your kids out here, you watch your kids grow up on these trails. This is who we are.
And without all this land being preserved,
We probably would have seen is a patchwork of development. And I think what the community decided was they had a different vision for the foothills, and they have a vision for our town that has park access embedded into the fabric of our neighborhoods.
This is the legacy of Boiseans. Like, this was, I happened to be a campaign manager that got to do a great job and make incredible friends and relationships and have a good experience. And yes, know that I was a part of this, but this is only, and this was only what it was because of Boise.
and you heard Sarah Arkle talk a little bit about it there when I asked what Boise's foothills would look like without these levees. We agreed they'd look more like the foothills maybe around, dare I say it, Los Angeles, which are covered in a lot more development. Yes, I said LA, so if you folks don't like that, I mean, that's probably why you keep voting for these levees.
Yeah, there you go.
Those LA foothills, they have open space, but you know, the earlier you get on the job of protecting open space, the better, and they haven't necessarily done that as well.
Yeah, I just have to take a moment because I enjoy these hills often, and it's kind of that moment where you're, only 15 minutes away from it, if you're on my side of the town, but on the other side of Boise. But, when you're doing that, it's incredible to know that you can actually get outside and be there so fast.
Yeah, absolutely. The Greenbelt, the foothills, it's just incredible. And that's something else they talked about, that these levees also improve access to those foothills and that open space, trails and just even people, owners of private property, allowing maybe a little trail or access to that public property right behind him.
Yeah, we're spoiled. I'd like to say that. All right,
We are
Dustin.
spoiled.
Thank you.
Agriculture and farmers, they feed the world. If farmers and agriculture all went out, the world would just starve, because all the people that grow our food, they're the ones keeping us alive, basically.
A simple truth from a 14-year-old who's grown up watching his family milk cows, grow feed, and work to keep a family farm alive. And this National Dairy Month, it's a reminder of the people behind the products we often take for granted. But across the country, more farm families are facing a question that's becoming harder to answer. When mom and dad are ready to step away, who's ready to step in?
I would say less than 30% of farms actually have a succession plan in place that's successful. And so the ability that we have to buy out our parents and move the farm to the next generation is quite remarkable and such an honor. And my husband and I are trying to set our farm up in a sustainable way that makes it so that our boys will be able to take over the farm if they so desire.
Now, for the Reese family, that question felt very real just a few years ago. Rising costs and tight margins left them wondering what the future of Moriah Dairy would look like and whether there would even be a farm left to pass down to their 5 young boys. But those challenges ended up changing the course of their operation. The family found new revenue streams by adding a creamery, a butcher shop, and new ways to connect to the community with agriculture. Now, coming up on Inside Ag at 6, we're going to talk about how one Idaho dairy, that dairy, is working to make sure that there is another generation ready to carry agriculture forward while also helping inspire that next generation of farmers along the way. Okay, full transparency here. You might have gotten a little bit of whiplash as we talked about water. I gotta say, we're in the news, we deal with technical issues, and that's exactly what happened. So a recap, Idaho surface waters are taking a major hit, and it is hurting farmers and what crops they can save. But that isn't all that is bringing concern. That water in Idaho doesn't just grow the crops, it also generates that electricity. The water melts and the snowpack fills the reservoirs, which spins the turbines and helps keep the lights on. It's a pretty good system, unless, of course, there isn't enough snow to make the deposit. And this year, parts of Idaho are finding out what happens when that account comes up so short. So Abby Wilt went to Swan Falls Dam to see what lower water levels mean for the power grid and for people who depend on it. As Idaho's first hydropower plant and the oldest hydroelectric dam on the Snake River, Swan Falls Dam has been turning water into electricity for generations.
Hydropower is low cost. It's our lowest cost resource. It's very clean. It reacts very well with other resources on the grid.
But this year, the question isn't how the system works, it's how much water will be available to power it.
So when we don't have that good snowpack, we have lower flows that set in earlier, and that means that we have to really manage our hydropower resource to the best of our ability.
Hydropower from dams like this usually make up about 38% of Idaho's power per year. But this year, with a low snowpack, that means less water is going into these dams, and that could mean less power on the grid.
So Idaho had a snowpack drought, and so we actually got precipitation that was coming through in the wintertime, but the temperatures were really warm. And so we did not accumulate good snowpack in the mountains.
Idaho's snowpack this year was one of the lowest on record, meaning slower water flows and less water in the Snake River. When there's less water, that could mean less electricity. Here's how it works. When water enters a dam, it flows through large pipes called penstalks, spinning turbines that generate electricity before the water continues downstream. The more water moving through the system, the more hydropower can be produced.
Our group regularly forecasts what stream flows are going to be in the river. And so a big part of how we help out is just knowing what's coming through our system.
So in years like this, what's the solution? That's where Idaho Power's engineering leader Frank Aurelio comes in. He tracks how much water is flowing through Idaho's dams and how much energy it's creating. If it's lower than usual, he says the utility has to rely on other energy sources like solar energy or natural gas plants.
If we don't have as much hydropower in a particular year, that's part of what our group is there for. We plan for that. And so if we see that we're not going to have as much water, we can do other things to set up our system.
They aren't just planning for lower flows, but also a higher demand of electricity, with Idaho growing as much as it is.
We anticipate having, similar or maybe even higher demand on our system this year, especially if we get a lot of warm temperatures this summer.
And that means while less hydropower doesn't directly correlate with higher costs for Idaho Power customers, it could increase bills slightly due to using other energy sources that cost more.
It's one of the reasons that we love hydropower, because it does help to keep our costs low in general, well below the national average. And so sometimes that does mean that we have to recoup those additional costs, primarily through the power cost adjustment. And so the following year, perhaps there will be an additional increase to recoup those costs.
But Aurelio says Idahoans don't need to worry about not getting electricity, but rather watching what source they will get it from.
Again, the water is going to be lower this year, but operating under lower water conditions and having lower flows is something that we're really used to, and something that, compared to last year, we'll generate a little bit less, but we'll use it as efficiently as we can to meet those needs.
Hydropower is one of the ways that Idaho is able to keep some of the lowest electricity prices in the country, so just another reason why low snowpack is really detrimental, and we're starting to see some of those effects this year.
Yeah, it kind of seems like the same message all across the board when it just comes to water. It's limit what we've got, and then we'll see how we can get there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Abby, thank you. All right, now to the 411 on the 208. A woman gave birth on I-84 after dealing with a flat tire. Idaho State Police says the birth happened on Garrity on-ramp yesterday. When a trooper arrived to the flat tire, the local fire department was already there, and within a minute of the trooper getting there, the baby was born. We haven't heard on how mom and baby are doing, but congratulations. And also we'll update you as we learn more. The Idaho Department of Lands is considering a major land exchange near Payette Lake. The agency could swap up to 15,700 acres of state endowment land in Valley County for federal Forest Service land of equivalent value. No final decision has been made, but IDL will host 3 public information sessions later this month in Cascade, McCall, and New Meadows. And after more than a year without a permanent president, Boise State University has narrowed down the search to a finalist. The school will announce who that candidate is on Tuesday. That news will come during BSU's board meeting, and that's the 411 on the 208.
The birds is right. A little toe tapping going on during those photos. I love it. And what a day. If you want to get out, check out some of the wildlife for yourself across the area. See if you can still see some baby ducklings out there. It is a beautiful day for any outdoor activities. 78 in Boise right now, 72 in Twin Falls, solidly mid 60s up in the mountains. Abundant sunshine, and maybe best news of all, besides the much warmer temperatures compared to 24 hours ago, the wind is pretty much non-existent. Calm winds to about maybe 5 miles per hour. That is a barely there breeze for our Thursday. Now tomorrow the wind may pick up just a little bit in the afternoon, maybe 10 to 20 mile per hour winds out of the northwest, which typically indicates cooler air coming in, but we will actually continue to warm tomorrow. The wind is because of what we call a tightened up surface pressure gradient, as the gem state is in between 2 different weather features, an area of low pressure that by tomorrow is well off to our east over the Great Lakes region, and then a strong ridge of high pressure amplifying in from the west. Between those 2 features, we get air that is moving in the atmosphere, and that translates to some breezy conditions at the surface, but it will be a beautiful Friday. You might welcome the wind with temperatures climbing into those mid 80s tomorrow. Might be refreshing in the afternoon. Tomorrow morning won't be quite as brisk as what we woke up to today. Some Treasure Valley spots like Nampa and Mountain Home dipped into the upper 30s this morning. We'll be upper 40s tomorrow morning, right around 50 for Twin Falls early on, still below freezing in Stanley, but upper 30s for Friday morning in the mountains. And look at this stunning day. 85 for Boise tomorrow, flirting with 90 across much of the Treasure Valley, mid 80s with sunny skies and breezy winds in the Magic Valley. Lovely in the mountains, low 70s for Long Valley and the Stanley Basin, and then 80 around Haley and Sun Valley. A picture perfect wrap up to the weekend, or to the week. And if you like your Friday, you'll love the weekend forecast from the Eagle Rodeo going on the next couple of days to Boise Hawks home games through the weekend. It is going to be a stunner for all of that. Sunshine, mid 80s. After that, though, next week, the heat is on. We hit the 90s on Monday, and that's where we stay through Thursday. A very toasty work week.
All right, let's take a look at some of your comments. We have Carolyn who says, why isn't agriculture education mandatory in classes for Idaho schools? I do remember taking some ag classes that were related, but I don't know if that was required or just like a rural Idaho school thing. But yeah, it'd be kind of nice. Stick to your roots. All right, then we have Dan in Boise who says, I'm so happy to have voted for the levy. Such a good use of our tax money. Even friends who were against came around and learned to love it. I mean, I do see quite a bit of people using those trails, so I think a lot of people have come around to it. And then we have Bob who says, yes, I remember the letter thinking it was the best thing that happened. That's what makes Boise so great to live in. We have all these trails that you can hike on. I mean, yes, again, I'll like reciprocate all of this because it's just nice to be able to get out and do it without having to leave town. I think that's my favorite part. So you can stay here. Everything's here. It's awesome. It's what makes Idaho so Idaho. Okay, I'm going to enjoy my weekend. You get out there and have fun.